Hey guys, it's Helena. So today I wanted to talk about 5 shockingly wasteful things about fast fashion that no one really talks about. And I feel like these are kind of the industry secrets and the things that brands don't want customers to know. And some of these 5 shockingly wasteful things come from my personal experience of working at a fast fashion company and really seeing the ins and outs of that entire process. So the first shockingly wasteful thing about fast fashion is that brands will actually burn perfectly new and unsold inventory. And these are fast fashion brands like H&M, Nike, Urban Outfitters. They will actually burn these unsold and new items of clothing because it's faster and simply because they have way too much product on their hands. And part of the reason why there is so much unsold inventory is because fast fashion brands are producing new collections every 2 weeks or even more frequently than that. And that leaves these brands with tons of unsold clothes. H&M is known to have burned 60 tons of new and unsold clothes since 2013. And if clothes aren't burned, they're often sent overseas, oftentimes back to India where they get shredded, and it's just a whole cycle of constant overproduction of clothing. The other surprising thing about this wasteful practice of burning clothes and inventory is that luxury brands and high-end brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel have all participated in burning of inventory as well. And for these luxury brands, their kind of reasoning is that they don't want people to counterfeit their items, they want to maintain their luxury status. My question to those brands as well would be, why was there so much overproduction to begin with? The second shockingly wasteful thing about fast fashion that no one really talks about enough is the fact that garments are air shipped and forced to be shipped by air in order to meet delivery dates. So this means that if a factory is working on an order of say like 1,000 pieces of clothes, but they have to meet a delivery date in order to get those clothes into the warehouse in time for their customer or the brand that has, placed this order of all these garments. If that delivery date isn't being met, these brands will often force their factories to ship orders by air. They're forced to use the most carbon-intensive method of shipping, as opposed to shipping these orders by sea, which is much less carbon-intensive. And with fast fashion, a lot of these orders are being placed as shipped by air from the start. So they don't even have an option to ship by sea because that time would take too long. Which brings me to my next point, which is minimum order quantity and why so many pieces of garments have to be produced at once. So minimum order quantity is the amount of clothes or items that a supplier says they will produce in order to take on that order. Because fast fashion is so cheap to produce, for instance, the cost of a shirt can be like 50 cents to $1 to make, these factories will push for a minimum order quantity of say 1,000 shirts. So if a shirt cost $1 to make, they would know that they would at least make $1,000 if they were making 1,000 shirts. And these factories really have to think about the time, labor, the cost of their garment workers, and for them, it might not be worth it if they only have say 500 shirts that they have to make. The fourth shockingly wasteful thing about fast fashion that no one talks about is the fact that perfectly good garments are actually mutilated and cut and can't be worn. And this is because they need to be sent overseas as samples and because of customs clearance and to make sure that this garment won't be resold in the country that it's sent to. Brands will actually cut holes and mutilate perfectly good samples in garments so that these samples won't be held up during that shipping process. And because all these samples are being constantly sent back and forth, that means a lot of garments end up being cut. And in order for the customs to know that this is a mutilated garment, that hole has to be pretty visible and it has to be made clear that the garment is mutilated. Once that sampling process is done, these garments can end up in the landfill because people might not think they're wearable, and it really is up to the brand to then try to recycle those mutilated garments. And if they don't do anything, more likely than not, these mutilated samples and garments will end up in the landfill. The fifth shockingly wasteful thing about fast fashion that no one talks about is that during the fabric production process, new fabric test yardages will end up in the landfill if they don't meet the designer or the company brand standard for that fabric yardage. So factories are asked to create a sample yardage of the fabric that will actually then be used to create the garment itself. And a lot of the times these yardage fabrics, when they are received by the brand, the color might be off, the hand feel might be off. If the brand doesn't like the fabric when it comes to them, that test sample yardage, they more often than not will just end up throwing that into the landfill if they don't have a recycling process or a recycling program in place to kind of use those test yardages for something else. Another issue here is that if that test fabric was made with polyester or blends with spandex, it's really hard to break down those fibers and to recycle them, and more often than not, fast fashion companies are creating a lot of these blends of fabrics, and it's going to be harder to try to recycle these yardages if they wanted to. As you can see, there are a lot of things about fast fashion that brands don't really want customers to know and that no one really talks about because these brands aren't trying to explain the process to customers, and these are things that really kind of happen behind the scenes. And another thing to remember is that a lot of these wasteful and unsustainable practices actually don't just apply to fast fashion brands, they also apply to higher end brands. I think when it comes to changing the fashion system, we should really be asking why we are producing so many clothes at such a fast pace and what we can do to really slow down the whole production of fashion and to really start considering whether or not the clothes we are purchasing and whether the clothes being made are actually of high quality and of high standards, and whether or not they will last a long time rather than just pushing for more production and more consumption. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe down below, and see you next time.